Design is generally thought of as a visual spatial discipline. Sure, there's a sound design for movies and podcasts, and there is information design. But most graphic design simply doesn't engage more than our sense of sight. What about our sense of touch, our sense of taste, our intuitive sense that there are other beating hearts out there in the world? Laurie Haycock Makela is a designer who is interested in involving a range of sensory experiences. Recently, she was one of 6 installation designers to participate in an exhibit of multisensory and immersive experiences at the Dallas Museum of Art. The exhibit is called Speechless, Different by Design, for which she also designed the book. Laurie joins me today from her home in Carson City, Nevada, to talk about that and about her extraordinary career in design for this very special episode of Design Matters for the Bend Design Conference in Bend, Oregon. Laurie Haycock Makela.
Hi,
welcome
Debbie.
To Design Matters.
Thank you. That was lovely. Thank you.
Hi. Thank you. Thank you. Laurie, is it true that you now live next to the original Pony Express depot?
Yes. Well, yeah, because it's a small town, so you can actually, there's a lot of memorials and different things that recognize that moment. And I just think it's awesome that I'm here. I can work here, like you and I can talk, internet going, everybody's dialed in, but I'm literally, when I think about where I am, where the Pony Express, kind of started, I think, whoa, 100 years later, this is what it is. And we get to just sit and with no pants on and do this sort of thing. Yeah.
Looking at the stars. Your daughter, I'm going to start that again. Your daughter, Carmela Mackala, is an up-and-coming director, and I read that she recently worked on a video for the musician Gary Clark titled When My Train Pulls In, and she's known for her provocative work, having previously shot a steamy video for Atmosphere's Ain't Nobody. And I read that on set, she created a unique family work ethic, bringing her vision to a high level of craft and emotional power. And I'm wondering how you influenced her work ethic, this family.
Oh my goodness. I'm so surprised that you are mentioning that, talking about my daughter, which is lovely, and my kind of family. And I will tell you what's interesting, and therefore you might want to not talk about this. But my daughter learned, yes, from her dad, super inspiring, although he passed away when she was 8. And the whole vibe in the family, and her, my nephew, her uncle, Vincent Haycock, is a very kind of a famous, film director in Los Angeles, and he was really her mentor. So it kind of went generational. Vincent studied with me when I was working at Cranbrook. He learned, 16-year-old kind of hanging around Cranbrook. Then my daughter was old enough and he took her on. But the postscript to that is my daughter, turns out that, and this is just true confession, she's super talented, and that's why I'm so moved that you brought that up. And she kind of went into LA and filmmaking and all that hardcore. But the LA life and the expectations in film and all that stuff that you mentioned, like how cool is it, how hot it is, do you have the best director, do you have the best artist, do you have the blah, 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 blah. She was really, ultimately, she just said, I don't like this. So if you ask me next why I'm in Carson City, Nevada, my daughter said, let's get out of here. We packed up, we got in a car, Thelma and Louise style. We went to Nevada and just started driving. She met a guy in Carson City and we moved here. And she just left everything. She just had a baby. She's married. She just loves it. She has nothing to do with the film world. End of story.
Wow. What an incredible story.
I was like, is this a good, I've never talked about it like that
once
ever,
we start
because
to go,
it is kind of like that. Wait, she's like she just said, you know what? I want to have a family and have a regular life and live in just a mellow place. And I was like, boy.
Well, I think it's just so interesting because that family work ethic is similar to, I think, the family creative ethic in the way that you've reinvented and moved and had such different, vibrant chapters of your life.
Oh, thank you.
That
is a
about. So I
segue
think
because
it's
it
really
is when I
interesting.
saw what she was doing. She went from having this. When you said steamy, I like that word. She kind of had this steamy career moving, and her cousin Vince was like going, "Go girl, we need women in film, blah, 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 blah." And she was like, I know I'm supposed to do this, but actually, here's what I really want to do. Is everybody okay with that? And she said, Mom, I know your 70s feminist is freaking you out. And it did, because it did. And then I was like, you know what? Thank God you are choosing this other way of life that also makes sense. And yeah.
Well, a 70 feminist set up a scenario where women should
exactly.
be able to choose.
And I had to work myself off that cliff and say, wait, this, what is this?
Yeah.
And she said, Mom, I understand that this is kind of like counterintuitive or whatever, but family is family, and getting a grip on having a life that you like, that's a thing. I respect that. So, yeah. It's crazy you mentioned that, so thank you.
Laurie, you grew up in Woodland Hills, California, in the San Fernando Valley, and one of your brothers is a Zen monk.
Oh.
What was your childhood like?
Wow. You are good, dear. My brother is also it's a huge part of my life, and and I've been working on a story about his life forever, and called Monk Junk, and it's because my brother, hugely influencing, because when we were younger, we lived in Woodland Hills, but in the 70s, but there was also a lot of drugs and a lot of crazy things, and people wanting to get out of the valley. And my brother was sort of evolved into a very smart junkie. He was a heroin addict for a really long time. And so when the story of how he became a monk and has now been a monk and he lived in Korea for almost 20 years, and now he lives in upstate New York Zen Center, Buddhist, a Korean Zen Center for years. That's a very profound influence for me. How one he's still the same person. And I kind of grew up with all that difference, like, oh my God, wait. And when I tell the story, my brother was a heroin addict turned Zen monk. Crazy. It's like, well, it really is how I learned a lot about Buddhism from like front and center, and a lot about change, really profound change. And we're still in touch every day. He's very much, and it's not just like, it's not as simple as probably most people know, that monks don't all look and sound and act alike, like, oh, he's just so Zen, it's like, it's a practice, but it doesn't mean you're also an asshole, doesn't mean you're also weird, it doesn't mean you get off the rails, but you have to, that practice. So my brother's a big part of my life, and thankfully we're just still, sharing a lot of stuff. Yeah.
As you were growing up, you've said that you didn't know what graphic design was, but in high school, you realized you liked what the school newspaper and the magazine looked like. Can you talk about the boy in school and his use of the word typography?
Yeah, I think no one knew what typography. What is that? No one knew graphic design, but we were doing the paper, and at the time I took a lot of kind of, I don't know, it was like, oh, I'm the youngest girl editor, da da da. But what I just noticed is I was just really into the construction of it, what it looked like, how you brought up words and pictures and all that stuff. So anyway, yeah, this guy just wrote it across the thing, like a love note, like, your topography is so fine or whatever that, something like that, And it really struck me and it stuck on me, and I kind of saved that thing, and I just thought, what does that really mean? Of course, the idea of it being a landscape is cool. It just feels really good, and I'm like, whatever he really meant, maybe he's smarter than I thought. At the time, I remember going like, oh, that's not typography, kind of figuring out that's not really what he meant, and going, okay, you're dumb. Yeah,
it's
right, you dumbass, you don't know, but also just being flattered by whatever he thought it was something that was noticeable, and it was just about scale. When I think about it now, I remember just, those basic things, creating scale, creating that pop, creating some kind of balance. And I also love type, and I liked the way words looked. And that was the beginning of that. And yeah, topography. And now I just like that. It's like, it is the landscape of things,
Yeah.
Yeah.
You went to the University of California at Berkeley and initially majored in English. At that point in your life, you thought you wanted to write, but all that changed when you met a few architects who walked you over to the architecture building. What
blew my
happened
mind
then?
because I just saw people putting work on the walls, big things on the walls, having discussions, sitting around on high chairs and stuff like that. It sounds crazy, but I just had never seen that kind of discourse. And I also realized, because one of my first courses was typography with Alistair Johnson. And he, anyway, it's the first time I really started to see type as, anyway, I think I got off. I really went into a memory lane there. I'm sorry. I really did.
No problem. So you discovered graphic design by being walked over to another part of your college campus. And while that sort of feels like serendipity, it also feels in some ways quite logical. At that point, you said that writing and typography and language and design all became one thing to you, and how the writing looks and feels on the page. Do you still feel
absolutely.
the same way now?
I mean, because now I think even more than ever, because writing, I think any journal, I'm not a journalist, but would tell you now even writing has changed because of the virtual kind of discourse, that we don't write the same that we used to, knowing that it was going to be in a newspaper or in a magazine or in a book or whatnot. We know that maybe it needs to be really like brief, or we know it needs to be just a phrase or just a clip, and I'm just really into that kind of, even in the beginning of a project, figuring out what word, just kind of a, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Clip, cut. Yeah.
It's okay. We can.
Yeah, and no, it's so funny. I mean, sometimes you ask me something and I'm just kind of like, wait, there's so many different ways to answer that, but sorry. Okay. Yeah.
Are you good with
if that's
what you
enough
said?
for you? Yeah, I don't. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah. In 1982, you went on to start an MFA at RISD, but left before you graduated. How come?
With respect to everyone involved, I thought it was more conservative than I imagined. And and this sounds so arrogant now, or I think my thoughts are now, even in retrospect, deeply arrogant. But I just thought, whoa, wait a minute, this is just not really very what's happening. And I didn't really know what was happening, but I knew it was just it just seemed old-timey. And so I did leave, and I kind of like regret a little bit because of the arrogance, and not that it's just that, because I think about now, as I've taught for many years and all that, and I think, damn, But that was really it. And so I just thought, oh, wait, that's not what I meant. That's really very pretty. We're going to do both. It just seems, and kind of corporate-y and logo-y and I don't know what. And I thought, I think there's more. Yeah.
You didn't go back to get your MFA until the early 90s when you went to Cranbrook. After leaving RISD, you began teaching at Otis College of Art and Design in Los Angeles, and it was there that you met Scott Mackala and described it in the following way. One day we were standing there while critiquing a student, and I remember nothing more or less than the feeling of falling upward. He literally had a white glow around him, kind of like an energy field. He could have been a UFO for all I know, but the feeling was mutual because he actually began to talk so fast that he stuttered. I knew my life had begun.
My goodness, you've made me cry.
I'm
Because that really happened like that. You know what I mean? It was so visceral.
Yeah, it's so once in a lifetime, and it's so magical. So it was really love at first sight, like just instant.
He was really special, and
wow.
And that, he was just had such an physical energy, and other people feel that around him, or when they knew he had so much charisma and kind of the energy field was, but I felt it between us, and it just was instant and awesome. Yeah.
April Greiman once described your combination as upper body, meaning you, and lower body, meaning Scott. And you've said that you always liked that description of your grafted hybrid union, but added that it also depended on where you stand. And I wanted to know what you mean by that.
Well, I think that, it's just so funny. It's just sometimes you just feel like, no, I'm going to be the dancer today. I've got my hips going here. That's a brilliant idea. I'm going to do this. I think it can. I guess I meant it can flip either way, and maybe I was just jealous because he was just so kind of like. And when I say sexy, I don't just mean in every ordinary way. I mean just in a thinking way. Just like that. Really, just always surprising and yeah. Anyway, so the upper and lower. That's funny. But I also someone recently said to me. It's a guy who's a Democrat, but he's married to a Republican. I said, whoa, that's a really weird, that must be difficult right now to even have a conversation, to watch TV together or anything. And he said, you know what, I've always believed in the two-party system. And at first I thought, wait a minute, he's off topic. And then I realized he just meant even in a relationship, there is such thing as a two-party system. And Scott and I really had it. It's like, which is why when he died, I felt like it was really hard to keep doing anything. And that's my problem. But the two-party thing really worked for us. And it was just so deep and inspiring and everything. And then when it's gone, it's like just a big, dumb silence. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about more of what you did together before he left the earth, and then talk about how that happened. When you first got together doesn't even seem like the word, crashed into each other's lives. You began to teach together. You started a studio together. What made you decide to leave your teaching positions and go back to be taught and get your MFAs at Cranbrook?
Okay, so we were teaching at Otis, and also we were
Otis,
at Cal Arts, just when Lorraine Wild came in, that was super turbulent all around. And Scott wanted to go to Cranbrook. And I'm going to tell you the truth is he wanted to go, and I was like, well, I'm going too. And we're actually in the middle of a breakup because, it was very explosive and very intense to live together. This is just before Cranbrook. So it's like, you know what, let's just split up for a bit. His mother was sick with Alzheimer's. My mother was sick with cancer. We just kind of like split up and said, take a break. And then I heard he was going to go, yeah, cool, and I'm going to go to Cranbrook. And I said, really? Okay, me too. And then we just got back together and just did that. We just went.
Oh, Laurie, you're forgetting a really important part. Your mother died, and he showed up on your
I
doorstep.
feel like you're like in my head. Who told you that? That's so funny. Oh my God! No, this is when one knows that your partner is like for reals, and so when we broke up, it wasn't like I'll never see you again. It was just like, oh my God, you're so intense. You're changing my life. I don't know. Just go away for a bit, and you have your things going with your, So but we still kept in touch. And anyway, when my mom died, I called him, and I swear he was at my door that night, and he was just there. Just, hey, baby. And that's when you just know, hey, baby. That's it. And because he just knew he was there. When people say, oh, I'll always be there for you. And then he just was there. And that was a different, of course, when you lose your family and, I'd already lost my dad, and I would soon to lose my other brother. And I mean, a lot of things were going on, but it's like he just was waiting for, when someone is, I don't mean to say vulnerable, but kind of when one is just going, oh Lord, whatever we got going, let's just put it together right now. And he just came. Yeah. And he's a good, I would, now talking to you, I'm going to go, he's a really good guy. It's like he was a really good guy.
Yeah. Well, by the end of your first year at Cranbrook, you got married. You went to the Caribbean for your honeymoon. And right before graduation, you got an interview to become the design director at the Walker Art Center. And is it true that you interviewed in a short dress with a plastic... Oh, 1 second. Stop that. Okay.
I heard you.
Did you hear that, Curtis?
Uh-huh. Oh.
Were you hearing anything? Okay. Okay, no. Okay, I have to start again because my cat just jumped up on the desk and was like sitting in the equipment. So that's what happened. Okay, I'm going to do it again. By the end of your first year at Cranbrook, you and Scott got married. You went to the Caribbean for your honeymoon. Right before graduation, you got an interview to become the design director at the Walker Art Center in Minneapolis. I read that you interviewed in a short dress with plastic grapes pinned to your chest.
Yes, ma'am.
While 8 months pregnant.
Yes,
and you
ma'am.
were offered the job.
That was a rocking time. Yes, and that was Kathy Hallbrush was the director of the Walker, and she is an awesome woman. And I just want to throw in that Kathy McCoy was at Cranbrook. She kind of set me up with interviewing there, and it was these are. I don't mean to, but it was when I think about the women who helped me kind of get there, because that was the most awesome situation. The working environment was unbelievable. But I was 6 months pregnant. And can you believe that? It's like just boom, because I was working again very quickly, after, I took a couple of months off, of course, and all of that. But it's, that's epic. I cannot believe that happened.
You then went to work in a beautiful modern studio at the Walker, hired lots of fantastic people, while Scott stayed home and took care of Carmela, who was just newborn at that time. That's quite progressive for that time to have a husband that
and
would
he
be
was
willing
doing
to do
his,
that.
just beginning his work. So he did the MCAD catalog during that time. So that was amazing that he did that. But also I have to say, but when I think about that, because I think about, again, with my daughter wanting to be home with, and all these different choices. And I was able to earn money. I had an exquisite job, but also I had an income and health care so that he could do that. and he could also work at home. You know, so when you think about it, it's just all these, and I say to my daughter, you know, these are choices every couple just makes. It doesn't really matter who does what. Just make these decisions and go for it, you know? And so I think it's incredible that he was the stay-at-home dad, and he's building his career, and that I had a cool job that I was able to start our family, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. The design critic and journalist Peter Hall described your time at the Walker as one where you transformed its visual style from an unwavering adherence to the clinical international style into a remarkably flexible and unconventional approach that would set up the Walker to this day as one of the most innovative museums in terms of its design approach. Did you know you were doing that at the time? Did you just come in and shake everything up, or was it just a byproduct of your talent and sort of a way of engaging with the
Oh my God, I
museum?
think that's Peter Hall's writing. Oh dear. I think it was the time, you know, and like having Kathy and different talents and the openness to try. And I think we were just at the end of that era, because the Friedmans, you know, who did that modernist were so good and so superb that it was, again, about that kind of cockiness to say, yeah, well, that's all great, man, that modernism, but watch this. You know, we're just going to like trash it for a bit. And and so yes and no. I mean, I think we were aware that there was a change, and I think Kathy, the director, wanted just experimenting. So that's the like, to me, you know, that, and just having talent, such good designers would come, and because they knew they had opportunity to do really interesting things. And that was yeah.
That was such an interesting time in graphic design history, with the New York School and then the Cranbrook School and the West Coast School,
Yes, yeah,
and the
yeah, yeah,
legibility wars, and the Massimo Vignelli sort of look and style
Yes.
versus the style of Ed Fella and David Carson and Scott and you. What was it like to live through a time, now looking back, that you could see as a defining moment in graphic design?
Isn't that crazy to think? And because I feel lucky that I kind of tapped into all, I mean, it's kind of like the girl at school who sort of knows everybody but nobody. It's like, I'm really affiliated with Cranbrook, but also I'm really affiliated with, you know, kind of with Cal Arts, a little bit with Art Center, a little bit with USC, mostly West Coast, I guess. But, you know, so I felt like I had a lot of cool exposure. Or I guess the question is, yeah, okay, Scott was rocking it. It was technology. It was all of those things that were happening at once that was really fun. So it made it so anything was possible. It was all okay. I don't know. And it's just not, I don't feel like it's like that now. I mean, I don't know what people are experiencing now, but it's like we're in another place. So it's a virtual thing, and it's a whole different deal.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how design history views this time. But certainly the idea of, and I was talking to Steve Heller about this morning, and how, you know, his article, The Cult of the Ugly, really put a pin in the map of what graphic design was then, and that pin will be there forever. Really highlighting a moment where how something could be viewed or read or perceived was separate from how it looked.
Yeah, that was really, I mean, I don't know if there's anything, I mean, now we just have different questions in the air. So it's just not like, I don't really care if someone uses crazy fonts or good fonts. I mean, I have an arsenal of like 3 fonts, and it's good enough for me. So it's a really, you know, it's, what a crazy time. I mean, where I think someone like Scott wouldn't have really, there just had to be that certain kind of little crack in the concrete. And I think when you asked me that about the Walker, I mean, it was expected at that time to just like make changes, get things going, you know. Yeah, and
they
so
knew
it
who they
wasn't
were
like,
hiring,
oh,
right?
I don't know. You know, it's like, no, the whole idea. In fact, you know, that was the pressure of um, what's the word? I don't want to say decompressing. I want to say deconstructing modernism at a most exquisite modern museum that was done so beautifully and blah, blah, all respect. It's like you just have to go in without thinking too much. You know, otherwise it's really like, oh my God, no, I can't. You know, you just have to. And I think about when you ask me that, I think, wow, I just must have just went balls out and just said, let's go. You know, I don't know, but it was cool.
A typography and branding project for the walker that you created with legendary typographer Matthew Carter was added to the design collection at the Museum of Modern Art in 2011. What was it like to work with Matthew, and what was the biggest thing you learned from him?
Oh my goodness, when you think about openness, no, we had an email exchange that went on for some time and talking about ideas, and he just understood when you talk about breaking down modernism, or maybe you weren't talking about it, but comes is that he just got it, even though he is also he just has this respected, legendary view. And I don't know, that was fascinating because we evolved this concept, and he just started sending us these samples of this kind of, this type that you could, we call it these serifs, where you could take them on and off, and you could just, the snap off, yeah.
Oh, the snap off serifs. Yeah, so how did that work? How did you do something that had a
and that's really, you have to
serif,
ask him, because it was
like
just brilliant. And what it was brilliant also, we had, again, designers working with me who just went, oh, I get this. And they just started doing design. They just started to snap on, snap off. And you realize to have flexibility like that, it's just so natural. You just think, well, why not? And, Andrew Blauvelt was there for some time afterwards. And I don't know exactly if he carried on with that exact font, but the spirit of that just kept going and going and going, because there was so much flexibility and kind of ambiguity, and each snap you did, each designer was kind of responsible for, anything could happen with that font, and it was really fun. But you had to have really talented people who understood how to use that program. But Matthew Carter would just come and hang out with everybody and talk about what he's trying, and the ideas were very collaborative. But in the end, again, it's his brilliance that went, how about like this? And then we had an open enough institution that said, yeah, we can handle that. Let's go, Yeah, really rare.
That's rare.
Yeah, and that's why I always say I just don't. Yeah. I tried to do that. Invited him to do when I was at Art Center. We were exploring a new identity for Art Center, which in the end that kind of exploded. But I invited Matthew Carter to come and do. Let's it's like let's get the band back together and try this, but in a different institution. And in the end of the day, that project kind of collapsed, and as some projects do, but he was game, to just keep exploring. And I thought, he's just a very special thinker. Yeah.
You and Scott became co-directors of the graphic design department and designers in residence at Cranbrook in 1997, and have written about how you jammed Carmela and your books and your flat files into the car, invited a few folks who were working with you to come along, and returned to Cranbrook. And at that point, you said that the Art Academy looked exactly like Hogwarts School of Witchcraft.
Have you ever been there?
In what way?
You have, you know what I mean, though.
I've been, yes.
Oh my God,
but
it's just so magical, and to me, it's like when we first got there. That scene when you're in a world of black and white, and then you kind of drive up there, and then everything goes in color. It felt like that. It was the Hogwarts, but it's just this very magical place, because people, we live there, as we live there. Our students live there. We live there. Or I live there as students. We live there as faculty. Oh my goodness. And you just feel like you're just, every corner is so new, like, oh my God, I never noticed that before. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to say, Laurie, I was there. Elliot Earls invited me to come to be an artist in residence for a few days. And I got to sit in on classes and participate in a whole bunch of events. And I think I maybe was there for 3 days. And at the end of the experience, and this was probably 10, 12 years ago, I was ready to give up everything, my corporate job, my home in Manhattan, and move to Cranbrook, to Michigan, to go to Cranbrook and get an MFA.
Right.
That's how seductive and charismatic and just so full of
Yes.
spinning atoms that place is. It was unbelievable.
Yes.
I've never
And I
had
know
that
you've been,
experience before. I
yes.
was ready to, and it was all. Yeah, and I've been first of all, I've been to so many incredible schools, so many incredible environments and countries and places of education and worship, and I have to say that experience at Cranbrook was the only time I was ever like,
Yeah.
I have to change my entire
Yeah.
life right now. And really, it was only fear that held me
No,
back from
Debbie,
doing
I
it.
mean, not only, were we able to be students there together, got married there, we had my baby there. I mean, I've had 2 children, not literally born on that campus, but just right there. And oh my God, I just feel like there's just not, and like you, I've traveled a lot and taught in all different places, and there's nothing else like that. And such a small community that those relationships stay with you, as like whether it's a school or whatever. These relationships are so profound, and it's like a Cranbrook family, and I don't know. It's the landscape, right? It's just.
Yeah, I think it's just the energy, it's the air, it's the history, it's the souls that have come before, and combination with the new souls that are
Yes.
there. It's just
And so
a very
we really
special place.
kind of lived there, and that's, it's an astounding place. It really is. And I think and to have such a small community, I don't know. And it's, when I tell people, it also is not just technology and design and blah, 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 and art, it's craft. There's that foundation, it's history. Like, people forget that no, that's still a real thing. I mean, and that I like too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was also struck by the level of trust in student risk-taking, which I thought is a really important attribute.
Well, it's almost like if you don't take a
foster.
risk, you're like, a wimp. You just have to. That's what scared most people there. They'd be just like, what I knew this more as watching my students is like what was making people quiver is like, oh my God, I have to just be so epically amazing every day. And I was like, hey man, you have 2 years. Just relax. Nobody knows. Nobody's going to say anything. Nobody's watching. You've got 2 years to figure that shit out. And that's also the beauty, is just relax. Yeah.
Yeah. You and Scott ran your own design studio at the same time. You called your company Pictures for Business and Culture, and you had clients like Nike and MTV, really at the top of your game. Then one day, a few months after you arrived as the new designers in residence, you had a brain hemorrhage at 40 years old. And in your book, Where is Here, you write this about the experience. The hemorrhage followed 3 sequential orgasms in the ladies' room of a trendy restaurant in Soho, New York. That moment of extreme pleasure set off a congenital time bomb. A malformation of a tiny blood vessel exploded into a pool of blood in the left front hemisphere of my brain, like a gunshot inside my head. 24 hours later, I was surrounded by neurosurgeons, all surprised to see me still alive. Laurie, after that experience, you've said that you could actually feel the thingness of thinking, the thingness of thinking. I'm wondering if you can share what that was like and how you were able to recover.
Well, okay, so I had Scott and I had Cranbrook, and these are communities that are like, help me recover. I'm just going to start there because I think in any other situation it would be would have been harder. Well, because the part of the brain that was damaged was the left hemisphere, and the left hemisphere has to do with language and words, and so I was, the day it happened, and when you have a brain hemorrhage, sometimes it doesn't just like, oh, I'm dead. It happens, and then you're just kind of tripping out, and it's slowly inside kind of blowing up. So in 24 hours, you could be dead. You're just kind of going like, okay, whoa. And then I was doing a conference and supposed to give a talk with Scott, and Lorraine Wild called me or something like that, and I remember realizing that I had no idea how to write her name down or understand really what she was telling me. And this is an old friend. You know when you start to go, oh, I have a I don't really know. You're telling me Lorraine, Lorra, and I'm writing down XY, gik. And that's when Scott was there, and he was like, it's an ambulance. There was this whole moment of going, what is this?
Right.
Anyway, so the language part was huge, and memory and all those things. But, I did recover, and I was in an environment that allowed you to be a little bit like Cranbrook, how one thinks and does their work is your own business. And so when I think about those days, I think, whoa, I had a little kid, I had the brain thing, I had the whole we just started, Scott was rocking out, he was traveling a lot. He was doing his Michael Jackson thing. I mean, everything was just crazy. When I think back we did that, I don't really know. When you asked me that, I really paused. I thought, I don't really know. I just think it was just so weird. And a lot of it just involved not being afraid and resting and getting used to this kind of bizarre. And slowly you recover the brain. And the reason why I kind of take a pause is because, I had a second one, and that's when shit hit the fan. So the first one, and the first one was really just
get to that, definitely.
This is freaky, and this is really scary, but because I survived, but I was told at the time you have a 50-50 chance of having a second brain hemorrhage. And I don't know why, but I was just still kind of had that, we're cool. I'm good. And I don't know what I thought, but I just went, okay. Well, I mean, I didn't know what I was supposed to do with that, but, you just carry on.
In thinking about the publication of your book, Where is Here, which is where I read that quote from, you've said that you wished you'd focused your interest in sexuality in a more direct way in making that book. How so?
Well, I think, Scott, when you talk about the desire to take risks, there's that. And I think how that book was constructed, for better or for worse, the risks were there in different ways. And but anyway, but I thought that the part that people didn't really know or we weren't really going for is that, and when I say sexuality, I don't mean like weird sex. I just mean when sexuality is a big part of your life together and what you think is good to just send out to the world as a beautiful thing. Kind of like Nick. I mean, I just called Scott Nick. Nick is the name of my son. That was weird. But Scott, it was like having, like if he could have been like a Prince guy, he'd be Prince. Where just let it roll, and then and that's what I guess I meant is that it's sort of like, well, we didn't just really roll out the whole all things that we find kind of amazing and whatever. Yeah.
Well, there were some really interesting images. One of the images that I was struck by was the contribution that Stefan Sagmeister made, which was the close up. I couldn't figure it out at first. I was looking at it. I'm like, oh my God, that's a close up, really, really tight close up,
Right?
of a hanging testicle. And then, of course, I was like, I wonder if it's his. And I didn't ask him, and I should.
He'll probably remember the story differently, whatever. But I just remember we were like, Savan, we're doing this book. Can you contribute? Because all of these people, we just wanted contributions from all over the world, all the weird stuff that we liked, and just editing it out from there. But we did ask a couple people to just like, come on, and we kind of taunted him. I remember it this way, taunting him to do something completely extreme like that. And maybe Scott said, just like put your balls out, man, whatever. I don't know, but something like that. Or maybe he remembers it differently. But anyway, yeah, there they were. And they're just, and of course with Stefan's work, I don't know him well, but I'm assuming we don't always know if that's him or not and this and that. But it seems like, well, why not? And I thought it was, why not?
I can't imagine
and I
that
just figured, thank you,
Yeah. Yeah, and it's just the one hanging testicle, very close up.
Yeah.
You see all the little curly hairs.
And just go, what is this?
For quite some time.
And then you get to
I was
looking
really
at it so long, you just think it should look like that. Just one is good.
Yeah.
And then you're just like,
especially
one
once
is
you
fine,
figure it
thank
out.
you.
Once you figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah, I
They're
just
so
think
interesting.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
spent
think
a lot of
Scott.
time looking at them,
I mean, now that I think about it, because there was just an intensity, and we haven't defined, like you say, sexuality, but there just was this almost joyfulness around it. That's what it was for him, and also just kinkiness and weird. I mean, there was all that stuff that is fun about sex, and I think that's why I thought we could have gone further in some way, casual thought.
Yeah. Well, we're up to about May of 1998 in talking about your life, Laurie. And at this point, your husband, Scott, is a media design rock star. He has spiked blonde hair, blue eyes, what's referred to as a Brad Pitt smile. He wore black jeans and black T-shirts and Oakley wraparound sunglasses. He just returned home after a month working in Brazil. His design for the opening sequence for Fight Club was in production. Spring graduation was a week away, and he had just nailed a year-long contract with an international snowboarding company. You write about how at that moment you were in love and living in utopia. And then one night he goes to sleep, wakes up at 3 a.m, wakes you up and tells you he is afraid if he falls asleep, he won't wake up. And shortly thereafter, he dies. How on earth did you manage?
It's still astounding, isn't it?
It's astounding. He had a very rare disease that caused his death, and you had no knowledge that it was something that he had until it was too late.
Well, and actually, I don't even know if that's the disease he had. It was so kooky because at the time they were saying, "Oh, it's epiglottitis," but a couple things happened that are inexplicable, and it just tells you, oh my goodness, anything. Okay, so when he came home with a kind of he was traveling, he went to Brazil and this and that, and he came home and he had kind of an ear infection. He took some medicine. He went home, felt better after the medicine. We went to bed. And about 3 a.m, he couldn't breathe. And I'm thinking, oh, he's got the medicine, we're good, And anyway, this one thing led to, he just suddenly said, I got to take a shower, my whole, and then all of a sudden, of course, you're just like, fucking, we're call the ambulance, da-da-da-da. What I understand, it was kind of chaotic, but the ambulance people, they kind of just hung around instead of taking him directly. It was like, oh, maybe you're just kind of this, it's kind of that. And believe it or not, what I've learned recently from his sister, because she told me, she says, Laurie, the epiglottitis thing, that was a guess by the doctor. He was given the wrong medicine by the ambulance people on the way to the hospital. So he died on the way to the hospital. And so by the hospital, of course, revived him. He was all going up, but he had no brain activity for a couple of days. And so it's confused. I guess what I mean is why he got sick in the first place, a little ear infection, get a little better, da-da-da-da. At the hospital, they, well, we think it's epiglottitis, but he also was given, when you're supposed to, like, oh, you can't breathe, you give something, there's a different way, one goes into the muscles, one goes into the blood, blah, blah. Well, there was just a little fuck up. I mean, I know this is true because it was a big mess, but I guess, people don't know. People don't know. And it could have been epiglottitis, whatever, but it's like, it was just a lot of things that happen. It's like I don't really know. I honestly still don't really know what happened, but it happened so fast that, he was just saying goodnight to everybody. There's just a beautiful guy, and then it was over, just like that.
You've written about how the EMT guys seemed unusually slack. You mentioned it here, asking you questions while Scott's airways slowly closed shut. Do you think, and I don't know if it's wise to go down this would have, could have, should have path, but do you think if he had been treated differently, if they had taken him to the hospital right away, he could have survived?
Yeah, that's why it's so fucked up. Yeah. And so one asked this, to be honest, I have to say to myself, wait, I was sitting there. It just seemed so crazy. When you're afraid, it's like cough, cough, da-da-da. You don't think about it. I'm looking for his tennis. I'm just not thinking that this is it. This is it, I'm just going, I knew there was something. I called the ambulance. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, had I just actually put him in the car myself right away, that's a horrifying thought, right? But what I did instead is I called the ambulance because I thought an ambulance knows what to do. And so when, I track back and go, whoa, that was such a nanosecond of decision making. And I thought calling the ambulance and trusting whatever was going on there was the thing to do. And I also just thought, this is not anything extreme. Even when we went to as he was on the way, I went in another car because they were like, we're good, you go because you're going to want to drive him home or something like that. I don't know. And I'm thinking, I got to get his stuff so I can drive him home, in 2 hours. You're just thinking this is just a blip. You just don't, you just can't even, you can't even imagine. I know this isn't your quote or anything, but my kids and I have this thing like, man, never, ever go to bed with anything else but love for the person you're with because you just don't know. And Scott and I had a lot of that. We never went to bed mad. It wasn't like that. We're all like, in fact, in that story I say, the last thing is like, can I have a blowjob, baby? And I love that because that is so Scott. That's what I mean. It's like, and I'm like, too tired. Right. And I don't have regret for not giving that blowjob. A little bit, but kind of not really. Because we had our fine times. When you go like, okay. And that's honestly just to, I don't know, I had a lot of love and just full imagination and everything with Scott. And that's why I just feel like when people say, oh, do you ever want to marry again or whatever? It's like when you've had a lot of love, just solid, you're okay. You know what I mean? You don't have to search for more because that was a pretty solid experience, Right. Yeah, and I think he left with sending a lot of love around to the people, his students and everything like that. So, hey man, you have to say he was in a hurry to do the very best work. And
for a reason.
So,
Yeah. You've talked about how telling stories is therapeutic, especially when it comes to grief, and have said that you've not moved on, but you moved in to your widowhood. How have you done that?
Well, you probably know that I got married a second time. And so You do different, yes, Ronald Jones,
Ronald.
and you do see that one does different things to try to get away from your widowhood and just go, okay, a whole new thing. And also a very intelligent, passionate person, and like, okay, let's see how this thing fits. And the truth is, there's only one time a shoe really fits really good. So that was a chapter. The Ronald chapter was sort of like when you asked me, I thought to myself, had I just stuck with, I'm just going to stay with my widowhood, but I didn't. I tried to kind of get it.
I think that's a way to try to soothe yourself. I mean, I had a second divorce that was really, really hard. And it took me 5 years to get over it, really. And I did all sorts of terrible self-destructive things in that 5 years with all sorts of terrible self-destructive people. And, I look back at that 5 years and think, holy
yes,
shit,
you know what?
was
I appreciate you saying that, because the time with Ron, he passed away last year, and he's he's a fabulous person, and as a professor and all these things. But the time we lived together in Stockholm, and that time was really hard for a lot of reasons. And can I stop right there?
Sure.
I was like,
absolutely.
Wait, where was
hard
I
for a
going
lot of
there?
reasons. Yeah. Well, I don't know how much you want to talk about your second brain hemorrhage, but you were in Sweden working, you had a company, you were doing really extraordinary work. You were doing a lot of fine art at that point. You were doing exhibitions. And then you had another hemorrhage in the same part of the brain while you were teaching. And you said this about the experience. After that, I couldn't read or write. I didn't know the difference between the letter A and my left foot. I said tree, but I meant refrigerator. Numbers didn't make sense. Later, I learned that brain injuries like mine cause communication problems with 3 lyrical names: asphasia, difficulties with speech; agraphia, difficulties with writing; and alexia, difficulties with reading. And you had all 3. You had seizures in the street. You had brain surgery. Thanks. How are you still alive?
Yeah, it is astounding that I just feel like I'm kind of a poster that the brain just heals itself. It can. I don't mean to sound suddenly like our president going, "You're just crazy. I'm cured." But what it is you learn about compensation and about patience. There's a lot of ways to compensate. But anyway, it took me a long time. So I feel like I had about 10 or more years of just kind of a blank spot. But my kids were also young, so and I was going through a divorce, and I came back to the States. So it was kind of a very hard blank time, in terms of, when I love people professionally who can just block through their professional career like da-da-da, and then I did this, then I did that, and da-da-da. And when you have just these things that happen in your life that it's like, no, everything just has to stop, and you have to, your career and all these things that you think are super important are just not right now. So Sweden was where I recovered, and I was grateful. I was living with Ron, and he was very helpful, and because I had my kids there, but a lot of it in Sweden, thank you, Sweden, is I was in rehabilitation for many months, and occupational therapy, where you kind of learn things you already knew again. And I have to say, I was very, it was a really fearful time. I was afraid of just what was happening, how when you feel like you're stuck in a situation, you can't, how did you get here? And, whether it's a marriage or a country or a health problem or anything, you just feel so vulnerable and so much like, okay, I get it. I'm starting at ground zero, but where is that ground? And I got to get out of this. I knew I needed to leave. So, it was very, how you have those times where you think, well, how did I? And I don't know if I've said this before too, or whatever, but I would say to my brother, or my brother said to me, the Zen monk, he said, Laurie, when you left Sweden, it was like you put your son on your back and you just started swimming home. And that's true. I don't remember how I did it. I didn't have any money. I didn't have anything. The marriage, the divorce was like, dude, let's just say it's okay and bye-bye. Let's not work out anything fine out of care. And it was just, when it was starting over, and I don't know what age I was, but I was definitely in my 50s. I mean, it was just like, how did I get here? And then you just, that's my dog. I'm sorry about that. I thought I took him for a long walk.
It's okay. I love when we hear dogs.
Now this is like, you've been on the phone long enough, Mom. Okay, wherever we were, yeah.
When you were in the hospital, you were told you couldn't run a graduate program and do numerous projects at once ever again. You were told you'd have to see yourself in a new way, and that way was slow. It was the opposite of the way you previously lived. What were you imagining for your future? Did you think that you'd be able to recover as well as
that's what I guess I was saying about fear. You just, you alternate between going, I should be able to do that, and to just, I just can't. I didn't have the confidence, it changed me. Because when you can't trust your language, and you just don't.
Yeah.
In a way though, it's such a humbling thing that I have to say the last 10 years of being, your life has to get really simple. Doing one thing a day is just fine. And that I just feel like, wow, a lot of things you just say, what I've learned from occupational therapy or having a really severe brain injury is that actually one can recover, but it's going to be different. And just the difference is good, I mean, I just don't need to do as many things. And also I'm older, so what? It's just different.
Well, you can have, you can say no more often. I read that you were required to relearn signs and symbols, and that forced you to internalize design as a survival method. And I thought that was really interesting. How were you able to do that?
Well, don't you think that arranging things, organizing ideas, putting things in a certain way so that you remember it or other people remember it in a way, isn't that design is... I mean, I think every designer, don't we all talk about how design is just a way of living and a way of organizing your thinking and a way of organizing your physical space and everything? So maybe that's what I meant. Is that because I feel that the better, and when I say the better I get, because I still feel like I'm recovering, because I still have a lot of little glips and glaps that come up. But it's still design, and like all colleagues, I think, were the ones who made me, and I think I do talk about that as having old friends like Lorraine Wild or April Griman or these, Callie Nikitas, these people I've known for 30 years in different ways and different times in our life. And they've been there, like when I came back to LA, and I was so insecure, just like, can I? Anyway, I just felt like there was this sense of like, hey, the thinking is the same. It's just, I just felt like people understand that illness or change, it doesn't make you, now you're not that smart, or you're not that designer, or now you're not an artist. That's just kind of impossible. Maybe that's what I learned. It's like certain things that are just in your system and you've grown up with it in every which way. It's just part of where you recover to, or the place you go to feel better. And I will say that there was a time where I thought, I just can't think that carefully anymore. I don't have that kind of multidisciplinary head anymore. Oh my God. And the truth is, if I just relax and take my time, it's the same. You don't lose whole cognitive things. I mean, you do a little bit here and there, but I feel like I'm better in a weird way. It took me 10 years, whatever, to say that, but it's like, oh, if that's what it takes to slow down and not care, like, I'm sure you have certain projects that you think, oh my God, I'm never going to finish that, or no, I'm not really capable of doing that, I'm not, da-da-da. And I've come to find out through these little moments in life that, Laurie, you can if you just give it time, and if it takes 10 years, that's okay, just relax. And in that other part, when we started, and I was telling you about my daughter, a lot of that is about speed. If you're in the film industry, it's like speed and change and again and do it again and da-da-da-da. I'm like, so don't care that, I live with my garden. I just live in a very different place. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I can't imagine how hard you've worked to impact your healing. You're now currently teaching again for the Academy of Art University, San Francisco. You were appointed the first designer in residence at the University of Southern California, Roski School of Art and Design. And one of your most recent projects, it's quite an extraordinary project, was working with
Schleining.
Sarah.
Yeah, it's hard to say. Yeah, but
correct? Did I say it right? Schleining. Okay. Who was a senior curator of arts and design at the Dallas Museum of Design. And you helped create an exhibit, participated in a show, created the show's identity, and designed the exhibition book for a show titled Speechless, Different by Design.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
I've seen the work. It's magnificent. Can you tell us a little bit about the show and
how
it
yeah.
came to be?
I mean, that's such a beautiful example of if you just wait and be patient and the right thing comes back to you, and if you're ready to grab it, and I just thought I would never have that. I really didn't. I just didn't think that would happen again. But Sarah is, we met briefly 20 years ago at Cranbrook. She was a young curator and I was teaching there, but she's told me when we met, I was really grieving Scott. So she said, you were just in it. She was telling me, she says, you might not remember meeting me because you were in a very deep space, just a gone space. But anyway, she remembers. So I bring up Cranbrook because it's those connections. It's like a family. We met 20 years ago briefly, but she called me and she remembers this. And so she called me and suggested this project. And I was so still convinced that I was not ready for a complex project that I just blew it right. The minute she was talking to me, I was thinking, not only is this the most awesome project I've ever, it's like, like you're speaking my language. I was freaking out, but also I was so scared that I was not really ready for it. And oh my God, did I even have a printer that was working right? That type of thing. That I said no. And she just is so brilliant, I have to tell you. I mean, not because of this, but she's a very brilliant person. She just kept saying, it's okay, don't worry about it. You know what, just come to Dallas and we're going to just meet with the other artists and it's going to be cool. And I literally gave her other names to say, I would send her another email saying, I don't think you heard me. I'm like saying, no, here, check out blah, blah, blah. And I'm giving these different names. And she just kind of went, oh, did you send me an email? What? And I realized that she just had this intuitive, great curators and artists. I just have to say this intuitive sense of why certain people come together to do a project, even though you don't know what the outcome's going to be. So, yeah, she invited me. We got together in Dallas with the other artists. The neuroscience, she brought all these scientists that have to do with neurological thinking and difference, people who don't necessarily have language skills, but they are highly, tactile or what, we heard a lot of stories and a lot of information and stuff like that for a couple of days. And then I walked away from that and going, oh my God, this is the project of a lifetime for me, Yeah.
Yeah. The exhibition, it feels like it intentionally rejected the status quo. And Sarah has stated that everything that you all did was about the least conventional choice and what happens if we try not to use words. What happens if we don't do interpretive text but use pictures or videos? What happens if we make sensory deep impression spaces? You also gave the exhibition its title. Let's talk about the word speechless. In the exhibit book, there's a reference to a conversation with a linguist. And the linguist said, when you have a word that ends in less, less, that's a negative, so watch out. Why did you decide to use it anyway?
Well, I'll give you her name later, but because I super respect her, and it was just a very epic thing that she was kind of shooting off. We were shooting off ideas, and she said that, and I knew it was coming from a smart place. But I just felt like speechless is like awesome, where you're just, and it felt positive. It didn't feel negative. When you just know that something is like, oh, I know that's a bad name for my baby, but whatever.
But it was grandma's name,
it's going to
so
be.
we've got to do
and
it.
because and also because, of course, Sarah tells the story about her son who. At the time he just didn't speak at all, and how frustrating that was. And so when I said, "What about speechless?" and I was afraid that she might find it too close to the bone, like too much, like, I don't want to go there. But she really embraced it, and she said, "That is it. Let's just go speechless." And I just somehow that, as when you name something, it gives it heft,
yes,
and it gives it like or like, and it's like, and then
right?
Next step you start creating its visual identity. So that's when we named it, and I just say I feel really deeply. Sarah is brilliant, and she kind of led me down that path, like many people we work with. Honestly, when who kind of go, no, you can go, no, keep going, no, keep going. Oh, did you fall out? No, you're okay. It was like very crazy. And she was the sort of person who would, when we started doing the design of the book cover and it was going to be for Yale, and I got all tripped out thinking, oh, Yale, it's got to be this way and that way and da, da, da. And she just did that same trick that beautiful curators do. She said, oh, that's kind of big, isn't it, Laurie? And she knows that I'm just the quieter, the smaller, that just like back off. And so the cover ended up with that one, like the most minimal. But that was, when you're working with somebody who just has really helped you kind of get to the place you were meant to be without telling you what to do, but just kind of letting you kind of, fall upward is my favorite. But it's just that, am I falling up or down right now, It was cool. It was good.
But the cover is it velvet?
Oh, what was the name of that fabric? It's a velvety, yeah.
It feels very velvety. It's so
No, I know. We're
sumptuous
working with the
and
printers.
sexy. It's definitely
right. You
a
don't
keep
have
it by
to
the
read
bed
it. I
kind of
promise
book.
you, it's just cozy. And that was really when Sarah said to me, "What do you want this book to feel like?" And I kept saying, I just want it to feel like you just want to hold it and put it in bed with you and just be cozy. And when we were working with the printer, of course, you get all these kind of generic stocks for cover, stuff like that. And I said, oh, guys, isn't there anything just velvety and sexy and and they found, of course, printers are just great, and they just come up with, and they went like this, and I was like, yeah, like that. And yeah, that was really nice that came together. Yeah.
Well, congratulations that the whole project is just so on point.
But
it really
but
is.
if I have a
It's
moment to
absolutely
say,
gorgeous project.
I don't talk about this in my talk because we wanted to keep it very precious, about speechless. But that exhibition was open when COVID came out, okay? So it's open. We're rocking out. We're supposed to travel to, Atlanta. Yeah, everything's going on.
The High Museum, right?
COVID comes out, and we have a show about touching and getting close to everything and like leaning in. And so, of course, not only did the museum, like every other museum in the country, close, But then we had to ponder, like, well, is this going to travel still? What does this mean? And it's heartbreaking, really, because everything about that show, about touch, like when we talk about the book. Now, it's a touch thing. But one thing Sarah kept telling me, even before COVID, is, so that exhibition won't travel. I mean, it was just kind of this shitty thing that happened where everything about what you're trying to do is that it's, you just can't. People aren't going to go in to all jam together in a place and breathe anyway. But what was cool is that Sarah said to me, Laurie, the thing about a book is that whatever we do in the exhibition, that's a temporary thing. It's over. She said, what matters is the book, and the book is the process of every other, the other artists and the thinking and everything like that. So the book, after COVID, the book even became more kind of special to me because it's like, yeah, you're right. There will not be an exhibition, most likely, because even the things in the show, like people who design things where a kid had to go up to that glass thing and touch it and breathe next to it and whatever, they have to redesign their work anyway, forever. And so Everybody was kind of like, but the book gets to stay the book. And that was kind of special. I thought, whoa, just for a second there thinking that books are kind of like iffy. It's like, no, they count.
Laurie, I want to ask you one last thing. I want to talk to you about the term graphic design. About 20 years ago, you stated that graphic design has always been a kind of iffy title for our discipline. As an undergraduate at Berkeley, it was called visual communications, and somehow graphic designer just meant you weren't really an artist. Graphic design seemed to mean only type an image on a flat surface, preferably with a client. As technologies and intentions changed over the last 20 years especially, graphic design has been broadened into terms like design thinking, visual storytelling, and digital humanities, and so on. What do you think of the evolution of graphic design and the work that is being made now?
That's a really good question. I think the work is evolving in such a galactic speed, in terms of how it's using technology and virtual experience. Yeah, like my son's into virtual reality stuff like that. So I'm kind of realized that there's this whole other world that is also equal but different. So anyway, I just figure that people will continue to make up new words for what it is, and I'm okay with that. It's not my job anymore. When you're involved in institutions, you think it's your job to name things like that. But I'm pretty okay with graphic design again, which is funny after all these years, just because, whatever technology we're using and whatever, it's still, certain qualities feel that way. I still work with words and image, but my technologies are different. Yeah, so I don't really care anymore. And I figure there's a whole other game going on that I'm not aware of, so, yeah.
Laurie Haycock Makela, thank you for creating such beautiful, multisensory work. Thank you for showing us what true resilience is. And thank you for joining me on this very special episode of Design Matters for the Bend Design Conference in Bend,
Thank you
Oregon.
very much. What a pleasure. Thank you. Okay, bye.
Thank you, Laurie. Laurie Haycock Makela's work can be seen in the latest book she designed called Speechless, Different by Design, and it is a work of art. This is the 16th year we've been podcasting Design Matters, and I'd like to thank you for listening. And remember, we can talk about making a difference, we can make a difference, or we can do both. I'm Debbie Millman, and I look forward to talking with you again soon.